Hey, good morning. It is Tuesday. We are finishing up our presentations today, and we're going to be starting with Lauren, who's going to talk about Black Tuesday, and you're going to do the same thing you've been doing. So just remember, have that 3, 2, 1 open, or if you're just jotting down notes, I'm going to do what I've been doing the last 2 days. I'm going to kind of tell you to pause after this if you need to finish writing that down, and then I will continue on to the next person. So, without further ado, here comes Lauren.
Hello, this is my presentation over Black Tuesday. If it'll load. Okay, thank you. What is it? On October 29th, 1929, stock investors traded nearly 16 million shares on the New York Stock Exchange, and now it will forever be known as Black Tuesday. Why did it happen? A crowd of investors gathered outside the New York Stock Exchange on October 29th when the stock market plummeted and the U.S. plunged into the Great Depression. Investors borrowed money to buy more stocks. As real estate values declined during the late 1920s, the stock market also weakened. Timeline. Black Tuesday. It all happened on October 29th, 1929. The stock market crashes, and it happened due to an overwhelmed economy and many banks will close. Hoover's promise happened in March of 1930. Hoover promises that America will recover from the crash within 60 days. America does not end up recovering within that period of time. Roosevelt's promise. Franklin Delano Roosevelt promises a New Deal. He delivers his promise after he's elected president in 1932. Timeline continued. The 32nd president of the U.S. is elected. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is elected the 32nd president of the United States on November 8th, 1932. The New Deal. 1933 to 1938, a series of programs enacted by FDR, such as the Emergency Banking Act, which successfully reopens all of the previously closed banks. New Deal Part 2. Many more programs from the New Deal are enacted, and by 1941, the Great Depression has ended. People involved. The people involved in everything that happened on Black Tuesday were stock investors. Where did it take place? Black Tuesday took place in New York City on October 29th, 1929. Impact on society. In the aftermath of Black Tuesday, America and the rest of the industrialized world spiraled downward into the Great Depression. The stock market crash of 1929 was not the only cause of the Great Depression, but it did act to accelerate the global economic collapse, of which it was also a cause. By 1933, nearly half of America's banks had failed, and unemployment was reaching 15 million people and 30% of the workforce. Life for the average American family during the Great Depression was difficult. Storms and a severe drought in the southern plains ruined crops. African Americans were particularly hit because they would be the first ones to be fired. History. Black Tuesday is often remembered and blamed for the start of the Great Depression. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Nice job, Lauren. Moving on to our very next one, which is going to be Ethan Waymuller. Next, you're going to hear Ethan. Go ahead and pause here if you need to get it written down to answer your 3, 2, 1. But I'm going to continue, so here we go.
The Lost Generation. What is the Lost Generation? The Lost Generation was a certain group born from 1883 to 1900, but were only named the Lost Generation after World War I. Why is it the Lost Generation? Many say it was the general lack of purpose or ambition by having all their hopes and dreams wiped away by the war and by seeing death and destruction on a wild scale. Many lost faith in the more traditional The Lost Generation. What is the Lost Generation? The Lost Generation was a certain group born from 1883 to 1900, but were only named the Lost Generation after World War I. Why is it the Lost Generation? Many say it was the general lack of purpose or ambition by having all their hopes and dreams wiped away by the war and by seeing death and destruction on a wild scale. Many lost faith in the more traditional way of life. What was the effect of these people from the Lost Generation after the war? The effect on people of the Lost Generation after the World War was substantial. Many then became careless with their actions and stopped setting goals and stopped working towards something great. What important people were involved in the Lost Generation? Ernest Hemingway, Gertrude F. Scott Fitzgerald, and T.S. Eliot were just a few important people in the Lost Generation. Most important people in the Lost Generation were writers, and these are the four most popular writers during that time period. Where did the Lost Generation take place? The Lost Generation took place in all countries that were associated with World War I. This mainly affected the United States, though, out of all the countries. When did this event take place in our history? The Lost Generation was declared the Lost Generation right after World War I on November 19, 1919. Writers of the Lost Generation. Many writers of the Lost Generation went on to write stories or books of their tales. Most to all of these stories were over-exaggerated and about an experience a writer went through, most involving World War I. Sometimes even writers read about the death of the American dream. One famous book you may know that involves this is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Summary of the Lost Generation. Summarized, the Lost Generation was the group of civilians born in 1883, 1900. They had experienced World War I, and through their experience, they were traumatized in a way that changed them dramatically, not just physically but mentally, and therefore they were called the Lost Generation. And then my bibliography. Thank you.
All right, nice job, Ethan. Moving on to our next one. Again, pause here if you need to finish working here, but we're going to move on to Austin Warner, who you're going to hear from next. Here we go.
Movies in Hollywood by Austin. The rise of movies. Moving pictures became very popular. Moving palaces were established and could seat thousands. Going to movies was a routine occurrence for many people, as they would attend more than once a week regularly. By the end of the decade, nearly 90 million people would attend movies each week. The movie cost. Movies cost around 25 cents for a live show in the 1920s. For 25 cents, Americans could escape from all their problems and lose themselves in a different era or world. Popular movies. Sherlock Jr., a film projectionist, longs to be a detective and puts his meager skills to work when he frames a rival by stealing his girlfriend's father's pocket watch. The Passion of Joan d'Arc. In 1431, Joanne is placed on trial on charges of her heresy. The religious jurist attempts to force Joanne to resent her claims of holy visions. He who gets slapped. A bitter clown tries to escape the young woman he loves and the lewd crowd who once betrayed him. Popular movie stars. Harold Lloyd, Gloria Swanson, Tom Mix, Chlorine Moore, and Norma Kamaladesh. Where were these movies made? Hollywood quickly became a place where many movies were made. Also, this is where many movie stars were formed. The summary. In 1920, movies started to become very popular. Also, movie stars were born. Movie places were created and could hold thousands of people. Movies became a regular thing for people, which they would attend usually. And then once it got up to, per week, 90 million people across America would attend movies weekly. And that's it.
All right, nice job, Austin. And our last one is going to be Jack, who you're going to watch video of. So here we go with Jack.
Fashion and styles in the 1920s. The 1920s, or as people called it, the Roaring Twenties, had a lot of very different and very cool styles of clothing and fashion during this time. From women in their flapper dresses to men in their fashionable Great Gatsby, which has also created its own movie called The Great Gatsby, which they were both created because of a man named Jay Gatsby. He was known to be a romantic millionaire and also had a shady bootlegger side of him. He was from Long Island, New York in the year 1922. Later on in his life, he was killed by George Wilson, who shot him and then himself, killing both instantly, but his fashion and style still lives on to this day. Other popular shows currently on Netflix, such as Peaky Blinders, is a good reference to another style in the Roaring Twenties. That's what they look like. That's a Great Gatsby. The Flappers. Flappers of the 1920s were young women known as the energetic, freedom-embracing lifestyle viewed by many at the time of outrageous, immoral, or downright dangerous. Now considered the first generation of independent American women, flappers pushed barriers in economic, political, and sexual freedom from first independent women, and they were also known as party girls, which would smoke and drink alcohol. That's what they look like. The cars during the Roaring Twenties. From 1919 to 1929, primarily North America and part of Europe experienced the rise of the Roaring Twenties. Social and economic circumstances underwent dramatic changes. The economic power and high employment of the United States allowed Americans to spend more extravagantly on entertainment. Certain car brands like Aston Martin, Alfa Romeo, Ford, Rolls-Royce, Cadillac, and Mercedes to making all these cars in racing and luxury so you can cruise around town in nice styling car or can hit turns in 100-mile-per-hour screaming beasts. Those are some of the cars during the Roaring Twenties. Even though the Roaring Twenties are far behind us, the styles and fashions still live on today. In theme styles to parties and Halloween costumes, it was an epic mark on just a fraction of the 1920s.
All right, nice job, everybody, today. So make sure you finish your 3, 2, 1 reflection and submit that in. This is, like I said, the last day we're going to have these. Tomorrow, I'm probably going to do something kind of creative for our quote-unquote vocabulary quiz. I don't think I'm going to give one like we traditionally would do. So check for that tomorrow, and it'll just kind of be a wrap-up of the 1920s. So we might have like 2 things to do tomorrow. So with that said, have a great rest of your day. Happy Tuesday. If you need a brain break, don't forget to watch that CNN 10 and take it easy.